The house I shouldn't have entered. I've always been the kind of person who ignored warnings. Curiosity has a way of overpowering fear, and that flaw in me is what led to everything that happened. Looking back now, I wish I had listened. I wish I had turned away, but instead I stepped inside. The house stood at the very edge of town, abandoned for decades or so, people said. Children whispered about it being cursed. Adults dismissed it with nervous chuckles, but never dared to go near after dark. Its windows were broken, its roof sagging, and vines crawled up the crumbling brick walls like skeletal hands trying to reclaim it. To most, it was just another ruin. But to me, it was a challenge, a mystery begging to be solved. That night, the moon was bright, spilling silver light across the cracked pavement as I approached the rusted iron gate. The metal groaned when I pushed it open, a sound too loud for the empty street. My heart was pounding already, but I told myself it was just adrenaline, nothing more. I carried a flashlight, though even its narrow beam felt fragile against the vast, yawning darkness inside. The front door was half open, hanging on its hinges like a jaw unhinged. As I stepped inside, the air changed instantly. It was heavy, damp, carrying the bitter scent of rot and mold. The temperature dropped, sending a chill down my arms, even though it was late summer. Dust floated in the air like tiny spirits, dancing in the beam of my light. Every creak of the floorboards beneath my boots echoed far too loudly, as though the house was groaning at my intrusion. The living room was the first place I entered. Old furniture, covered in white sheets that had turned yellow with age, loomed like figures frozen in time. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, revealing blackened wood beneath. A broken chandelier dangled dangerously from the ceiling, swaying slightly, though there was no breeze. I told myself it was just the draft. But deep inside I knew it wasn't. I took another cautious step, the flashlight flickering as though it were protesting. The beam landed on a cracked photograph lying on the dusty floor. Bending down, I brushed it off, revealing the image of a family. A man, a woman, and 2 children. Their eyes had been scratched out, not by time, but by deliberate force. My stomach tightened, and my hands began to shake. I wanted to put the photo back down, but I couldn't. It was like the smiling, eyeless faces were holding me there. Suddenly, the silence broke, a soft creak. From upstairs, I froze, every muscle in my body screaming to run. But my legs wouldn't move. I held my breath, listening. At first I told myself it was the house settling, wood shifting under age. But then there it was again, a slow, deliberate footstep, as though someone was walking carefully, trying not to be heard. The flashlight flickered again, and for a second, I was swallowed in complete darkness. My pulse hammered against my ribs, and when the light returned, I aimed it at the staircase. The steps were old, covered in a thick layer of dust, and yet, faint impressions broke the surface. Footprints. Fresh ones. I whispered to myself, "There's no one here. There can't be." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. I should have left then. I should have turned back, closed the door, and never spoken about what I saw. But my curiosity, my curse, forced me forward. I gripped the railing and placed one foot on the first step. The wood groaned loudly, protesting under my weight. And then I heard it, not from above this time, but right behind me. A whisper. So faint, I couldn't make out the words, but so close that I felt the breath against my ear. I spun around, shining the light wildly across the room. My breath caught in my throat. The beam revealed nothing but dust and shadow, yet my skin crawled as if unseen eyes were fixed on me. I stood there, trembling, flashlight shaking in my hand, staring into the darkness of the house that I should never have entered. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. Footsteps that weren't mine, I stood frozen at the bottom of the staircase, clutching the flashlight like it was the only thing keeping me alive. My own breathing sounded too loud in the silence, every inhale shaky, every exhale sharp. The whisper I had heard still lingered in my ear, as though the walls themselves had murmured my name. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, a trick of nerves, but deep down, I knew better. That voice hadn't come from inside my head. It had been right behind me. I took a step back from the stairs, shining the light across the living room again. Dust, furniture, peeling wallpaper, nothing out of place. and yet the hair on my arms stood straight, my instincts screaming that I wasn't alone. That's when I heard it again. Footsteps. This time, not from upstairs, but from the hallway to my left. Slow, steady, and deliberate. Each step landed with a faint thud, as if bare feet were moving across the creaking wooden floor. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and raised the flashlight toward the sound. The beam cut across the hall, illuminating a narrow corridor lined with broken picture frames. The glass inside them was cracked, reflecting the light back in twisted angles. At the far end, the hallway opened into darkness so thick it looked like a solid wall. The footsteps stopped. I hesitated. My instincts told me to run out the front door, but my cursed curiosity pulled me forward. Each step I took echoed against the silence. And every few feet I stopped to listen, nothing, just my heartbeat hammering in my ears. But then the sound returned. Not ahead of me, not behind me, directly beside me. Footsteps pacing in sync with mine, but on the opposite side of the hallway. The sound was too precise to be coincidence. For every cautious step I took forward, something unseen mirrored it perfectly, as if mocking me. I swung the flashlight toward the sound, but all I saw was the cracked wallpaper, the shadows stretching unnaturally across the walls. My breath quickened, and I pressed myself against the wall, trying to convince myself it was rats, or the shifting of the old wood. Anything but what I knew in my gut. Then came the whisper again, closer. This time I heard the words, "Just one. Leave." My chest tightened. I stumbled back, my flashlight beam bouncing erratically across the hallway. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. One of the picture frames on the wall had fallen slightly sideways. The photo inside was of the same family I had seen earlier on the floor. But here, their faces weren't scratched out. Instead, their expressions looked wrong. The father's smile stretched unnaturally wide. The mother's eyes seemed too dark, almost hollow. The children looked as though they were frozen mid-scream. I tore my eyes away, but the air in the hallway grew colder. My breath puffed out in faint clouds, though it was still summer outside. And then, the footsteps started again, not slow this time, fast, rushing toward me. Panic exploded in my chest. I staggered backward, nearly dropping the flashlight. Its flickering beams swung wildly as I bolted back into the living room. My feet slammed against the warped floorboards, and I didn't care how loud I was. I just needed to get away from whatever was charging toward me. I spun around, pointing the light back at the hallway. Empty. No rushing figure. No sound, nothing. But the silence was worse. It pressed against my ears, suffocating, as though the entire house was holding its breath, waiting for me to move. I stood there, trembling, unsure if I should leave or keep going. And just when I thought I'd convinced myself to run out the front door, I heard it again. Not footsteps this time, but a laugh. Soft, low. Coming from upstairs. And against every instinct screaming inside me, I knew I was going to follow it. The voice behind the door, that laugh, I'll never forget how it sounded low, scratchy, and filled with something that wasn't human amusement. It wasn't playful. It was mocking, like the house itself was laughing at me for thinking I could walk in and leave unscathed. My flashlight flickered again as I turned toward the staircase. The wooden steps loomed before me. Covered in dust and fresh footprints proof, I wasn't imagining things. My legs trembled, but something deep inside pushed me forward. Fear had me by the throat, but curiosity pulled the strings. One step, creak, another creak. Each sound echoed through the hollow house like a warning. I kept glancing back, expecting to see something crawling out of the hallway behind me, but nothing moved, at least, not where I could see. Halfway up, the air shifted again. It grew heavier, colder. My breath became visible, small clouds drifting in the dim light. I gripped the railing tighter, the wood damp and sticky under my hand, as if the house itself was sweating. When I reached the top, my flashlight beam fell onto a long hallway lined with doors. Some were cracked open, some completely shut. The laugh had gone silent now, replaced by something worse, whispers. Low, overlapping like 100 voices murmuring at once from behind the walls. I forced myself forward. Each step sank into the carpet runner, which was dark with stains I didn't want to think about. My light passed over the doors until I stopped at one near the end of the hall. Unlike the others, it was completely closed. The whispers were louder here, leaking through the cracks in the wood like smoke. I raised my hand, trembling, and pressed my palm against it. The surface was cold, colder than ice, as though something on the other side was sucking all warmth away. And then it spoke. Not a whisper this time, not laughter, deep, distorted, right against the door. "I see you." I stumbled back so fast I nearly dropped the flashlight. My heart slammed against my ribs, each beat painful. The voice had been clear, direct. It wasn't in my head. It was on the other side of that door. I shone the light at the crack near the bottom. For a second, I thought I saw movement, something shifting, dragging, a shadow darker than darkness itself. As the handle rattled suddenly, once, twice, then violently, as if something inside was desperate to come out. The sound echoed down the hall, rattling in my bones. I froze, torn between running and staying. My legs screamed to bolt, but my mind locked on the door. Against every ounce of reason, I reached for the handle. My fingers brushed at freezing cold, burning my skin like dry ice. I yanked my hand back with a hiss. The rattling stopped instantly. Silence. I stared at the door, chest heaving, trying to convince myself it was over. But then a knock. Soft. Gentle. 3 taps. Like whoever, or whatever, was inside, was politely asking to come out. That was worse than the rattling. At least the rattling had been honest. This was pretending. I stumbled back, shaking my head. No, you're not real, you're not real. But the voice returned, softer this time, almost coaxing. "Let me in, or I'll come out anyway." The words sank into me like claws. My light flickered violently, and for the briefest second, I thought I saw the door bulge, as if something was pressing against it from the inside, trying to push through. That was enough. I turned and bolted down the hallway, not caring how loud my footsteps were. The whispers erupted again, louder this time, following me, chasing me. My flashlight beam danced across the peeling wallpaper, the warped frames, the endless shadows. I didn't stop until I reached the staircase. But before I could rush down, I heard something behind me, the sound of the door opening. A cold hand on my shoulder, the sound of the door opening behind me nearly stopped my heart. The creak was slow, deliberate, and filled with menace. I froze at the top of the staircase, too afraid to turn around. My flashlight trembled in my hand, the beam bouncing erratically against the wall. The whispers had gone silent, that somehow made it worse. Silence meant it was listening, waiting. I forced myself to move, one step toward the stairs. Then another. The wood groaned under my weight, echoing down into the empty living room below. I kept my eyes forward, refusing to glance back. If I looked, I was afraid I'd see something I could never unsee. But then it happened. A hand, cold, damp, and impossibly heavy, landed on my shoulder. I screamed and spun around, swinging the flashlight like a weapon. Its flickering beam revealed nothing. No figure, no shadow, just the long, empty hallway. But the pressure on my shoulder lingered, icy fingers digging into my skin, as if invisible claws were holding me in place. I stumbled backward, nearly tumbling down the stairs. The pressure vanished, but my skin still burned where it had touched me, leaving a chill that sank straight into my bones. "Stop," I shouted into the darkness, my voice cracking. "Leave me alone." For a moment, the house obeyed. Stillness wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. I took the chance to descend the stairs as fast as I could without falling. My boots slammed against the wood, each step echoing like a drumbeat of panic. I was halfway down when I heard it, a thud. From upstairs, then another and another. Like heavy footsteps chasing me down. My flashlight flickered wildly, plunging me into darkness for split seconds at a time. Each flicker revealed something worse. Shadows stretching unnaturally across the walls, shifting as though they were alive. The footsteps grew louder, faster, until they weren't footsteps anymore, but a thunderous pounding that shook the very walls of the house. I broke into a sprint, leaping down the last steps and crashing into the living room. My lungs burned, my legs trembled, but I didn't dare stop. I aimed the flashlight at the front door. It was still ajar, just as I'd left it. Salvation was only feet away. but as I ran toward it, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. I skidded to a halt, staring at it in disbelief. My heart pounded in my throat, and sweat mixed with the cold on my skin. Slowly, almost reluctantly, I reached for the knob. My hand closed around it tonally, to recoil instantly. It was hot, scalding, as though the metal had just been pulled from a fire. A laugh echoed through the house again, louder this time, closer. The same mocking sound I'd heard upstairs, vibrating through the floorboards, rattling the walls. I spun around, backing away from the door. The living room was darker than before, my flashlight barely cutting through the thick shadows that writhed like smoke. The covered furniture loomed around me like silent figures, waiting, watching, and then I wasn't alone. In the corner of the room, just beyond the edge of my light, something moved. A shape crouched low to the ground, pale and twisted. Its limbs bent at impossible angles, its head cocked unnaturally to one side. I couldn't make out its face, but I could feel its eyes on me, cold, unblinking. My throat closed up. I couldn't scream, couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, trapped by its gaze. The thing crawled forward, its joints snapping and popping like breaking bones. My flashlight flickered again, and for a split second, the beam landed directly on its face, and I wished it hadn't. Its skin was gray and cracked, lips torn into a grin too wide for its skull. Empty sockets stared back at me, blacker than night, deeper than any void. And yet I knew it was looking right at me. I stumbled back, my legs giving way, and fell against the door. The wood groaned under my weight. My light flickered, threatening to die completely, and I slammed it with my palm, begging it to hold on. When the beam returned, the thing was gone. The room was empty again, but the hand returned. Cold, heavy. This time on the back of my neck. And a voice, colder than the grave, whispered into my ear, "You're mine now." The room that changed itself. The voice at my ear, ricey, guttural, froze every drop of blood in my veins. "You're mine now." I whipped around, swinging the flashlight in a wild arc. Nothing, just the sagging furniture and peeling wallpaper, the silence pressing down heavy enough to suffocate me. But the sensation of that hand still lingered, cold claws sinking into the back of my neck. I wanted to leave. God, I wanted to leave. My heart screamed for me to run, but the front door behind me wouldn't budge. I grabbed the knob again, ignoring the heat searing my skin. It didn't move, not even an inch. I stumbled back, clutching my hand to my chest, and that's when I realized something was horribly wrong. The room had changed. It wasn't subtle, it a trick of the light or my imagination. The living room I had entered was gone. The furniture was in different places. Chandelier that once hung crookedly was now shattered across the floor, glittering with sharp edges. The wallpaper had peeled away entirely, leaving the walls raw and pulsing like they were alive. And the door, it wasn't there anymore. Where it should have been was only more wall, stained dark, with something that looked too much like blood. I blinked hard, my mind scrambling for explanations. Hallucination, shocked, but the metallic stench in the air, the oppressive heat, the shifting shadows told me this wasn't in my head. The house was twisting itself around me, trapping me deeper inside. I staggered toward what used to be the hallway, hoping to retrace my steps back upstairs. But when I reached it, my stomach lurched. It wasn't a hallway anymore. It was a corridor, long, endless. The carpet stretched far into the distance, lined with door after door after door, identical, each one shut, each one waiting. No, this isn't real, I whispered to myself. But the words came out hollow. I turned back toward the room, thinking maybe if I closed my eyes, things would snap back to normal. But it only grew worse. The furniture had shifted again. The sheet-covered shapes were closer now, gathered in a half circle as if they were watching me. Their outlines seemed wrong, too tall, too hunched, their heads cocked at unnatural angles beneath the cloth. I tightened my grip on the flashlight, shaking so hard the beam jittered across the room. "Stay away," I muttered, though I knew they weren't moving. Not yet. Then came the sound. A creak, from the floor this time, from the ceiling. I aimed the light upward, and my breath caught. The ceiling was no longer wood and plaster. It was flesh. pulsing, veined, twitching as though it were breathing above me. And from it, thick black liquid dripped, splattering onto the ruined carpet at my feet. Each drop hissed like acid, eating holes into the fabric. I gagged, stumbling backward into the corridor, my mind screaming at me to run. But which way? Every door looked the same. My only choice was forward, so I ran. My footsteps thundered against the endless hallway as doors rattled violently on either side. Handles twisted. Knocking erupted, sometimes frantic, sometimes slow and deliberate. And through it all, voices spilled from behind the doors. Some cried, some begged, some screamed my name. "Help me! Don't leave! Open the door!" Ran faster, my lungs burning, the flashlight beam bouncing across the endless corridor. My heart hammered, each beat louder than the last. Then suddenly I stopped. At the very end of the hallway, one door stood slightly open. Unlike the others, no voices came from behind it. No rattling, just silence. It should have felt safer. But it didn't. Something about that open door was worse than everything else. The shadows spilling out of it stretched too far, writhing like tendrils across the floor. And though I couldn't see inside, I felt it staring back at me, watching, waiting. I inched closer, unable to stop myself, even as tears blurred my vision. My hand shook violently as I raised the flashlight toward the gap. The beam cut through the darkness just enough to glimpse what lay beyond. A room, but not just any room. It was my bedroom, every detail. My bed, my desk, the crooked poster on the wall, perfectly recreated inside this nightmare house. I staggered back, my blood turning to ice. No, that's impossible. And then I heard it, from inside my room, the sound of someone breathing. The thing in the shadows, that sound, breathing, slow, heavy, steady, coming from inside my bedroom. The one that had no right to exist here. I froze in the hallway, my flashlight beam quivering across the cracked door. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my feet betrayed me. I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't even blink. That was my room, down to the smallest detail. But it was inside this house. The breathing grew louder, raspier, as though whoever or whatever was inside knew I was there, waiting, daring me to look. My hand trembled as I pushed the door open wider. The hinges groaned, the sound scraping across my nerves. I raised the flashlight and stepped inside. And just like that, the world tilted. It was exactly my room, same posters, same bedspread, same cluttered desk. But everything was wrong. Colors were muted, the air thick with rot. My belongings looked off. The poster on the wall was smeared, the faces warped and stretched. My bed sagged, the sheets damp and dark-stained. Even my desk was covered in scratches, deep gouges carved into the wood. The breathing stopped. I stood in the doorway, light shaking across the room, my throat too tight to swallow. The silence pressed in, suffocating, until I heard something shift from under the bed. I aimed the flashlight low, the beam slicing through the shadows. My stomach lurched. Two pale hands clutched the floorboards, long fingers splayed wide, nails black and jagged. Slowly, unnaturally, something began to crawl out. First the arms too thin and too long. Then a head, its face scraped against the floor as it pulled itself free. It was me, and my own face. But twisted eyes, black hollows, skin cracked and gray, mouth torn into a smile so wide it nearly split its skull. My doppelganger dragged itself from beneath the bed, its neck lolling, joints popping. The sound of bones grinding filled the room. I stumbled back, shaking my head violently. No, that's not me. That's not me. It stood now, towering, its movements jerky and unnatural. Its grin widened, and in a voice that was almost mine, it spoke. "You don't belong here." My chest constricted, tears stinging my eyes. "Stay away from me." Tilted its head, jerking in sharp, unnatural movements, and took a step forward. The air grew colder with every inch it closed between us. My flashlight flickered, sputtered and then died. Darkness swallowed me. I fumbled desperately, slapping the flashlight, praying for it to work. In the blackness, I heard it moving limbs scraping the floor, feet dragging in stuttering steps, and worse, I heard it laughing. The same laugh that had haunted me since the moment I entered this house. The light flared back to life for just a second, and it was right in front of me, its face inches from mine. That monstrous grin splitting impossibly wide. Its breath was rancid, hot against my skin. I screamed and swung the flashlight like a weapon, connecting with its face. The figure crumpled backward, crashing into the desk. Papers and debris scattered across the room. I didn't wait. I bolted out of the bedroom, back into the endless hallway. My footsteps thundered as I ran, but the sound of pursuit followed, its scraping, dragging steps echoing close behind me. The corridor stretched endlessly, the doors rattling again, voices screaming from within. Some begged me to open the doors, but others shouted warnings. But one voice rose above them all, my own. Don't run, don't fight. I can't escape yourself. I sprinted faster, lungs burning, flashlight beams shaking wildly. Ahead, the corridor split into two directions. Both paths identical, stretching into darkness. I hesitated for half a second too long, and that's when I felt it again, a hand cold, heavy, wrapping around my wrist this time, stopping me mid-run. I screamed, yanking, pulling, but the grip only tightened, and when I turned my light toward it, it wasn't just one of them anymore. The hallway was full of me. Dozens, twisted, broken versions of my own body crawling out of the doors, their faces grinning, their eyes hollow, and every single one whispered in unison, "Stay." The secret buried beneath the floorboards, stay. The whispers came from everywhere, dozens of voices overlapping twisted versions of me. Their mouths stretched into grotesque grins, black eyes unblinking. Cold fingers gripped my wrist like iron. My flashlight trembled, throwing fractured light across their faces, my faces until panic blurred my vision. "No," I screamed, wrenching free with a desperate pull. I stumbled back, the light sputtered, died then flared again. The hallway was empty, no doubles, no voices, just silence. But the silence was worse. I stood panting when I noticed the floor. No carpet, only scorched blackened wood. From between the cracks pulsed a faint red glow. A heartbeat. Against my instincts, I pressed my ear to the boards. Screaming, dozens of voices shrieking, muffled, clawing at the edges of sanity. Then came the scratching. The floorboards shuddered. Splinters cracked upward as if something massive was pushing from below. A wave of decay and rot filled the air. Pale arms burst through, dozens, writhing, jagged-fingered, reaching for me. I turned to run, but the walls pulsed like flesh, doors melting away.
Oh, no.
Only forward? No, 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 I whispered, stumbling. But the floor split behind me too, more arms clawing upward, seizing my legs. I tripped, barely catching myself at the pit's edge. My flashlight beams sliced the darkness below. Bodies, an ocean of them, rotting, screaming, eyes hollow yet fixed on me. At their center, something vast shifted as burning red, locked on mine. And its face was mine, not twisted, not broken, whole, smiling. "You've always belonged here," it said, its voice drowning the screams. "You just didn't know it." Its arms dragged me downward, nails tearing skin, pulling me toward the abyss. My flashlight tumbled into the pit, illuminating the monstrous me one final time before vanishing. The floor yawned wider, my legs dangled, my strength failed. Then everything stopped. The arms froze mid-grasp. Silence smothered the hall. The glow dimmed. Something else was here. At the far end of the corridor, a shadow emerged. Tall, jagged, shifting like smoke. With every step, the arms recoiled, sinking back into the pit. Shadow loomed, faceless, yet impossibly solid. Though it had no eyes, I felt it watching. It raised a skeletal hand, pointing at me. And in a voice that shook the walls, it spoke, "One more night." The night that never ended, one more night? The words echoed through the corridor, sinking into my bones like poison. The shadow stood still, hand outstretched, as the last traces of the glowing pit vanished beneath the floorboards. My lungs seized, every breath shallow, dun darkness. My flashlight was gone, the corridor swallowed whole by blackness. Yet somehow I could see, not with my eyes, but with something deeper. The house itself pulsed faintly, like I was inside a living thing, and I could feel every wall, every creak, every movement. I stumbled backward, whispering, "This isn't real. This isn't real." But the walls closed in tighter. The air grew heavier. My chest ached like I was drowning. Then the voices returned. Not whispers this time, not laughter. Screams. Hundreds of them, filling the house, vibrating through my skull. The floor trembled, the walls bled shadow, and every door in the endless corridor burst open at once. Figures poured out. Twisted versions of me, crawling, walking, grinning. Their black eyes locked on mine as they surged forward. I ran. I didn't think I just ran, my legs pumping, my lungs tearing, the screams chasing me from every side. The corridor shifted, twisted, turned itself inside out. Every corner led back to the same hallway, the same broken boards, the same doors slamming open. No matter where I went, it brought me back. The house wasn't letting me out. I collapsed against a wall, tears burning my face, my voice raw from screaming. The shadows closed in, the figures drawing nearer, their smiles endless. One reached for Mitt's hand, brushing my cheek hand for the first time. I didn't fight. I was too tired, too broken. And then silence. Everything froze. The figures, the house, even the air. The shadow at the end of the corridor stepped closer, towering, its voice like thunder. "Now you know the truth." I wanted to ask what truth, but no words came out. The shadow leaned closer, and though it had no face, I felt its grin. "The night never ends, not for you." The corridor went black, and I'm still here.